Welcome to Beneath the Surface, the dark side of crime. Today we unravel a disturbing case that has gripped many for years. At the heart of this story is Kyler Yust, a man whose twisted actions led to the tragic deaths of two young women, Cara Kopetsky and Jessica Runions. These disappearances would not only rock their families, but would leave a haunting question. Could Kylr have been stopped earlier? Or was he destined to continue his reign of terror until the truth finally came to light? Join us as we dive deep into this tragic tale, one of obsession, manipulation, and murder. Let's explore the events leading up to the horrific actions, the investigation, the confessions, and the eventual pursuit of justice. Buckle up. It's going to be a dark ride. Chapter 1. The Beginning of the Nightmare. It all started in 2007 in Belton, Missouri, with a teenage girl named Cara Kopetsky. Cara was 17 years old, full of life, and working at Popeyes. She was described as a firecracker by those who knew her. Fun, energetic, and rebellious in the best ways, she seemed destined for a bright future. But she had recently ended her on-again, off-again relationship with a boy named Kyler Yust. Kylr, a year older than Cara, was a member of a local death metal band called Seraphim. On the surface, he might have appeared to be the brooding, misunderstood artist, someone many would dismiss as harmless. But there was something darker beneath the surface. Kylr's obsession with Cara had taken a dangerous turn, and her decision to break up with him in April 2007 ignited a violent, twisted chain of events. On the night of April 28, 2007, as Cara was finishing her shift at Popeyes, she ran into Kylr in the parking lot. Kylr, enraged by the breakup, forced Cara into his car. Armed with a knife, he threatened her, warning that he would slit her throat if she didn't reconcile with him. After a tense standoff, he eventually let her go, but not before Cara was left terrified, shaken, and scarred. Despite the terrifying encounter, Cara, determined not to be controlled, did what anyone in her shoes would do. She reported the incident to the police the very next day. Her mother, Rhonda, supported her, filing for an order of protection against Kylr just days after the incident. But, as we will soon see, that wouldn't be enough. Chapter 2. A Desperate Call for Help. Cara had hoped that the protective order would keep Kylr at bay, but that was far from the case. Despite the legal measure in place, Kylr remained fixated on Cara. By the morning of May 4th, 2007, Cara had gone missing. It was a bright, sunny day, and yet, as the hours passed, it became clear that something was horribly wrong. The last known sighting of Cara was on the security footage from Belton High School. She was seen leaving the school around 9 a.m., but after that, she vanished without a trace. No one knew where she was, and she never showed up for her shift at Popeyes that evening. Her mother, Rhonda, waited until 5 p.m. before she contacted the authorities to report her daughter missing. What had happened to Cara? Had she run away? Or had something more sinister occurred? Chapter 3. The police investigation begins. The police were quick to begin their investigation, and they immediately turned their attention to Kylr. After all, he had been the last person to have contact with Cara, and his history with her made him a prime suspect. Kylr, however, claimed that he had nothing to do with Cara's disappearance. He stated that she had called him the day before, and that she mentioned plans to hang out with a friend. According to him, she seemed fine, and they had a conversation about their breakup. But as the investigation progressed, things didn't add up. The police soon discovered discrepancies in Kylr's story. Phone records revealed that the calls Kylr claimed to have received from Cara had occurred hours earlier than he had said. This cast a shadow of doubt on his version of events. Despite his evasiveness, the police had no concrete evidence to charge Kylr with anything at the time. Cara's body had not been found, and there were no clear signs of foul play. The case went cold until new information began to surface, slowly and relentlessly. Chapter 4. Confessions and Secrets. Unravel. Over the next few years, Kylr's actions would be scrutinized as more and more people came forward with claims about his confessions. It started with his bandmate, Nick Yates, in 2010. Nick told the police that Kylr had confessed to him that he had killed Cara because she wouldn't love him anymore. Kylr had allegedly strangled her and disposed of her body in the woods. But that wasn't the only confession. A woman named Caitlin Ferris, who had been dating Kylr, came forward in 2011, stating that Kylr had told her the same story and more. He confessed that he had watched Cara take her last breath and that he had hidden her body in the woods. This was chilling, to say the least. The authorities were now dealing with a case where multiple individuals had heard the same story, but despite the confessions, they still had no body. It seemed as though Kylr's reign of terror would go unpunished as the search for Cara continued without resolution. Chapter 5. The Search for Jessica Runions. Jessica Runions was a 21-year-old woman with a bright future, but her life would be tragically cut short, much like Cara's. Her disappearance in 2016 added a new layer of fear to the already lingering sense of unease in the Belton community. It wasn't just that she had gone missing. It was that Jessica had left a party with Kyler Yust, the same man responsible for Cara's disappearance almost a decade earlier. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Kylr's violent tendencies were far from a thing of the past. Jessica's family had initially held on to hope. They assumed she had simply lost track of time or was staying with friends. But the nagging feeling of something more sinister grew stronger with each passing hour. When the police were called to report her missing, they discovered that the only clue to her whereabouts was the fact that she had left the party with Kylr. Witnesses from the party described him as aggressively flirting with Jessica, making her uncomfortable. They remembered how possessively he clung to her, clearly agitated whenever another man paid her attention. But it wasn't just his possessiveness that made him a suspect. It was the terrifying pattern. Cara had experienced the same behaviors before she vanished. The red flags were impossible to ignore. Kylr had tried to control Cara, and now he was attempting to do the same with Jessica. As Jessica's mother, Laura, began to contact friends and reach out for help, the police started connecting the dots. Kylr's presence at the party seemed like a crucial piece of the puzzle. It became evident that the case had more in common with Cara's than anyone wanted to admit. As Jessica's family feared, Kylr's control over her would turn into an obsession. He wasn't the kind of person who would simply let go of someone he had once loved or someone he wanted to control. The deeper the investigation went, the more it seemed that Jessica's fate was sealed the moment she encountered Kylr that night. Chapter 6. The Burning of Evidence. On September 10, 2016, the police were called to a fire in Grandview, Missouri, and what they found was disturbing. Jessica's black Chevy Equinox had been set on fire. The car was reduced to a charred skeleton, But the most telling thing about the fire wasn't the damage, it was the timing. The vehicle had been torched less than 24 hours after Jessica was last seen with Kylr. The fire was no accident. It was a deliberate act of destruction. Kylr had burned the car in an attempt to erase any trace of his involvement in Jessica's disappearance. But the fire didn't just destroy the car. It opened the door to a much larger revelation. The act of burning the car mirrored his earlier behavior with Cara. After all, Cara's body had been disposed of, and now Jessica's car was destroyed. Kylr was not just a murderer. He was a man trying to cover his tracks. Jessup Carter, Kylr's half-brother, was the key witness who would soon unravel the case. Jessup recalled that Kylr had come to him the day after Jessica went missing, looking shaken. It wasn't just the physical injuries from the fire. It was the guilt and fear that seemed to have consumed him. Kylr confessed that he had killed Jessica and burned her car to get rid of the evidence. This was a confession that no one could ignore, especially when Jessup's testimony lined up with the rest of the evidence. Jessup's decision to come forward was a courageous one. He knew the truth would destroy his relationship with his half-brother, but he couldn't live with the weight of Kylr's actions. Jessup feared for his own safety and that of others who might come into contact with Kylr. The confession he made would be instrumental in the case moving forward. Chapter 7. The investigation turns dark. As the investigation into Jessica's disappearance grew more intense, Kylr's erratic behavior became harder to ignore. It wasn't just that he was being evasive. It was that he seemed almost indifferent to the fact that 2 young women had disappeared under his watch. He was in many ways a cold, calculating individual whose behavior was increasingly marked by a complete lack of empathy. When the police questioned Kylr, he remained unnervingly calm. He denied any involvement in Jessica's disappearance, sticking to his story that he had no idea where she was. He claimed that she had simply left to meet a friend, but the witnesses' testimonies contradicted his alibi. The investigators had a growing sense that Kylr was not just involved in Jessica's death, but was likely hiding something far more sinister. But the key moment in the investigation came when Kylr's ex-girlfriend, Caitlin Ferris, came forward. Caitlin had been dating Kylr during the time of Cara's disappearance, and, after a tumultuous relationship, had broken up with him. She had been terrified of him ever since, and when she learned of Jessica's death, she knew she had to tell the truth. Kylr had confessed to her about killing Cara, details that only the killer would know. And now, Caitlin feared that he had done the same thing to Jessica. As Caitlin explained her interactions with Kylr, the police realized that this was the breakthrough they needed. Caitlin's account of Kylr's behavior was chilling. She described his obsessive control over her, his frightening temper, and the confessions he made about both women. The more Caitlin revealed, the more the investigation painted a clear picture of Kylr's involvement. Chapter 8. The shocking discovery, expanded on April 2017, marked the turning point in the case when a mushroom hunter in Cass County, Missouri, stumbled upon 2 sets of remains. The hunter, who had been foraging in the woods, had no idea that the discovery he made would bring closure to a decade-long mystery. The remains, which were later identified as those of Cara Kopetsky and Jessica Runions, had been discarded like garbage in a secluded area. The location of the bodies raised chilling questions. Why had Kylr hidden them? in the same area. Had he been so confident in his ability to evade the law that he felt secure enough to dump both women in the same spot? Or was there something more to the location? Perhaps it was a place that Kylr had frequented, a place that held meaning for him, a place where he could hide his darkest secrets. The families of Cara and Jessica were devastated. For Cara's mother, Rhonda, it was a heartbreaking confirmation that her daughter had never made it out alive. She had spent years hoping that Cara would return, but now she was forced to confront the brutal reality that her daughter had been murdered. For Jessica's family, the discovery was equally agonizing. The long wait for answers had been unbearable, and now they had the painful truth. Chapter 9. The arrest and trial. Kyler Yust's arrest came as a shocking yet almost inevitable conclusion to a case that had spanned years of emotional torment for the families of Cara Kopetsky and Jessica Runions. The moment Kylr was taken into custody felt like a fragile victory for the grieving families, but the path ahead was still laden with uncertainties. The arrest did not guarantee the closure they so desperately needed. It only marked the beginning of an arduous legal battle. The trial, which took place in 2017, became a spectacle that caught the attention of the local community and the wider nation. The prosecution's case was built around Kylr's confessions and the disturbing pattern of manipulation, control, and violence he had exhibited in his relationships. The testimony of multiple witnesses who had heard Kylr confess to the murders, including his half-brother Jessup Carter, his ex-girlfriend Caitlin Ferris, and his bandmate Nick Yates, painted a chilling picture of a man consumed by jealousy and rage. These testimonies were the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, but they also forced the defense to launch a furious counterattack. Kylr's defense attorneys worked relentlessly to undermine the credibility of these witnesses, calling their testimonies unreliable and accusing the prosecution of bias. They tried to frame Jessup Carter as an unreliable witness, suggesting that Jessup had his own motives for accusing Kylr. They even went as far as to imply that Caitlin Ferris, his ex-girlfriend, was exaggerating or lying about the confessions Kylr had made to her. But despite the defense's aggressive attempts to cast doubt, the prosecution had one of the most powerful pieces of evidence at their disposal: Kylr's own words. The confessions, both verbal and recorded, left little room for doubt. Caitlin Ferris, in particular, had secretly recorded Kylr admitting to the murders, detailing how he had strangled both Cara and Jessica, revealing intimate details about the crimes that only the killer could know. The courtroom was tense throughout the trial. Kylr, usually composed and detached, seemed unnerved as the evidence stacked against him. His calm demeanor betrayed the coldness that defined his character. It was clear that he was not going to come clean or accept responsibility for his actions. The defense tried to argue that there was no physical evidence linking Kylr to the murders, but the testimonies and the secret recordings painted a picture too vivid to ignore. For the families of Cara and Jessica, sitting through the trial was a nightmare. Cara's mother, Rhonda, was often seen wiping away tears as she listened to the graphic details of her daughter's final moments. Jessica's mother, Laura, struggled to maintain composure as she watched the man who had taken her daughter's life sit calmly in the defendant's seat. Both women had hoped for justice, but nothing could prepare them for the emotional toll the trial would take. On April 16, 2021, after several weeks of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Kyler Yust was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter in the death of Cara Kopetsky and second-degree murder in the death of Jessica Runions. The verdict was bittersweet. Justice had been served, but it didn't bring the women back, nor did it erase the years of pain they had suffered. The judge, after hearing emotional victim impact statements from both families, sentenced Kylr to life in prison for the murder of Jessica Runions and 15 years for the manslaughter of Cara Kopetsky. Though the families felt a sense of relief, it wasn't the kind of peace they had hoped for. The scars would never fade. The grief would never fully be erased. But for the first time in years, there was a semblance of justice. Chapter 10. The Aftermath and Reflection. The aftermath of Kyler Yust's conviction left both families grappling with a complex web of emotions. While there was relief that the case had finally come to an end, there was also a deep sense of loss that no trial could heal. The void left by Cara and Jessica's deaths would never be filled. The pain that Rhonda and Laura felt every single day could not be erased by a guilty verdict. Cara's mother, Rhonda, in particular, found herself struggling with the reality that she would never see her daughter again. Throughout the trial, she held on to the hope that perhaps some part of Cara would return, some memory, some glimpse of the joyful, vibrant young woman who had once filled her life with laughter. But when the verdict was delivered, Rhonda realized that hope would never materialize. Her daughter was gone forever, and no amount of justice could ever change that. Jessica's mother, Laura, faced a similar struggle. While she could take some solace in knowing that Kylr would spend the rest of his life behind bars, the pain of not having Jessica in her life was insurmountable. She spoke publicly about her daughter's love for life, how she had dreamed of a future filled with possibility. Yet, that future had been stolen by Kylr's obsession and cruelty. The family's reflections on the case revealed the emotional toll of living with unanswered questions for so long. Cara and Jessica's disappearances had plagued their loved ones for years, and every day had been marked by uncertainty, fear, and a constant gnawing sense of not knowing what had happened. The discovery of their bodies in 2017 had provided closure, but it came with a heavy cost. The healing process was long, and there would be no easy path forward. For the community, the case of Kyler Yust had served as a wake-up call. It was a chilling reminder of how a person's outward appearance can be deceiving. Kylr had blended into society, even having relationships and friendships, while secretly harboring violent tendencies. His actions had taken 2 young lives and left a trail of broken families in his wake. The town of Belton would never forget the women who had lost their lives because of one man's twisted obsession. In the years following the trial, both Rhonda and Laura continued to advocate for victims of domestic violence and obsession-driven crimes. They found solace in knowing that their daughters' stories had not gone unheard, and that, in the end, justice had been served. But for them, it was a small victory in a long, painful journey toward healing. As Kyler Yust sat in prison, serving his sentence, he continued to deny his guilt, maintaining that he had done nothing wrong. His inability to show remorse for his actions only deepened the wound for the families, but they found some comfort in knowing that he would never again harm another person. The question of why Kylr had killed was one that would never fully be answered. Perhaps there was no clear reason, no logical explanation for a crime so brutal. Sometimes, the truth is simply too horrifying to comprehend. Kyler Yust's case was one of obsession, manipulation, and ultimately, murder. It serves as a haunting reminder that the darkest stories often remain hidden until they are uncovered by those brave enough to seek the truth. While justice was finally served, the families of Cara and Jessica will forever carry the weight of their loss. Kylr's conviction has closed one chapter of this story, but the pain, the questions, and the unanswered why will continue to echo through the lives of those left behind. For the families, the journey to healing will take time, but knowing that their daughters' stories have been heard and justice has been done brings a measure of peace. As we reflect on this story, we are reminded of the importance of speaking out, of not allowing dangerous behavior to fester unchecked, and of standing up for those who cannot protect themselves. The darkness that Kyler Yust embodied will forever be remembered by the victims, their families, and a community that will never forget. Thank you for joining us on this emotional and unsettling journey through the tragic case of Kyler Yust. The stories of Cara Kopetsky and Jessica Runions are a stark reminder of how obsession and control can spiral into unimaginable horrors. We hope that by shedding light on these crimes, their legacies can live on, and justice continues to find its way to the victims. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Beneath the Surface, The Dark Side of Crime. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know your perspective on this disturbing case. Stay tuned for more stories from the dark side of crime. And remember, sometimes the darkest secrets are hidden beneath the surface.